Let's continue our conversation and bring back a gentleman you saw, about 22 minutes ago, closing out his own program. Steve Malzberg, host of the eponymously named Steve Malzberg Show, which airs nightly here on Newsmax TV at 7 o'clock Eastern. Also with us, the senior contributor for the Federalist, D.C. McAllister, via Skype from our nation's capital, and hanging in via Skype from Southern California, our good friend Michael Reagan. You can find and follow Michael on Twitter at Reagan World. Steve Malzberg, interesting to hear Brother Gizzy there. He said it would not be a landslide for Trump, but the bottom line is the Donald needs 50% plus one to pull off all the delegates in a winner-take-all scenario.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're all waiting to see. We're all waiting to see, if he gets that and if he could get all 95 or 90 or 85 of the 95 delegates. And, and the momentum increases and it takes off from there. And it's Pennsylvania and it's Maryland, it's the northeastern states. And he's going to do very, very well in all those states as well. Look, I think in addition to New York values, and that might be the case here in New York, but I think going forward, I think this debacle, this delegate debacle. And, I had Bill Kristol on earlier, and Bill Kristol said, why the heck? He said, I like Cruz. I would vote for Cruz if I was a New Yorker. He said, but why is he bragging about this, taking these delegates from Trump? It's a mistake. It's foolish, he called it. And I think that Trump has, again, just like he did with immigration at the beginning, he's now revved up the base and become the kind of underdog of sorts by saying, hey, look, I'm winning the votes, I'm losing the delegates. Now, whether it's the rules or not, this is going to be his thing going forward. And I think it's resonating here in New York, and I think it will resonate going forward.
DC, we're going to call on you in just a second for your perspective, but we have someone waiting patiently on the telephone from the Centennial State of Colorado. Let's welcome Barbara to Newsmax TV. Good evening, Barbara.
Hello, JD. I just want to thank you and Newsmax for being one of the only honest stations left to watch, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
I was an independent for 45 years, changed to Republican to show my loyalty to Donald Trump. Totally disenfranchised with what happened in Colorado. I think the American people have been duped for a very long time with this delegate voting. We've been like sheep just going along. The problem is I keep hearing people say, this is a game plan, this is a game plan. It's not a game plan. What we feel and why we are voting for Donald Trump, and I'm passionate about this, we are fighting for our lives. We're not fighting for a vote. We are fighting for our lives as Americans, to save our country from the illegal immigration, for the killings, the slaughters, the rapes, all the things that are going on, the borders that are totally corrupted, the drugs that are just horribly taking over.
We hear your frustration, Barbara, and don't mean to cut you short, but we wanted to get the thoughts of some others. We thank you for your call and for your perspective tonight here on America Votes 2016. D.C. McAllister, you hear in Barbara's voice the frustration, the passion mirrored by many voters. Some look to Donald Trump, others look to Ted Cruz. A headline today, Cruz saying even were he to finish third in Pennsylvania, he'll pick up at least half the delegates. Should he cool it on that delegate math?
No, because this is how he's going to win the nomination. And I understand the caller's passion. I have from the very beginning. Frustration with where America is heading and with the establishment. But what we need to understand is there's a difference between corruption by the establishment that we've experienced for years and the process as it is, as part of our republic. And we can be passionate and say, I'm fighting for my life, but if you abandon law, if you abandon principles, and you abandon the way that our government is put together and the way we do elections for that passion, you're going to end up with tyranny. And that's what I'm afraid we're seeing. While I understand and I am very sympathetic, and I've been one of the first people on the front lines to defend Trump supporters and their passion and why they're so angry, I do not think we need to abandon our system of government and why we have these systems in place.
This isn't our system of government. This isn't in the Constitution. These are rules made up that are changed every year. They can change tomorrow. They're not. This isn't our election system.
Let her respond, Steve. DC, go ahead.
The delegate system has been in place for hundreds of years. This is not anything unusual. It goes back to Thomas Jefferson. It goes back to, the representative way of governing. We don't have a direct vote in our and our republic. We do not have a pure democracy. Now, the different ways that the states behave and the different rules that they have by changed during the years, but this idea of representative government and indirect voting is part of our system so that we don't have a mob rule. Now, to throw that out is to actually bring in more tyranny and more danger into our country. We need to follow the rules and vote with our brains as well as our hearts and do what is right in America and not get swept away in passion and throw away our laws and our systems that protect us in the long run.
Go ahead, Steve.
Larry Kudlow was on with me earlier, and he said the Republicans should throw out all this nonsense and have primaries in every state, and the winner, the one with the most votes gets the most delegates. I don't see how this leads to tyranny, how this protects us from tyranny. We're not throwing out laws. Again, the Republicans or the Democrats could change in any state tomorrow. All they got to do is decide to change. This isn't embedded in anything. It's a terrible way to do things. It leaves the public feeling like they don't count. And I don't see how this is going to lead to riots and tyranny if we change the system to make it more representative.
Let me get Michael Reagan in on that. Hang on a second, DC. Let me bring in Michael Reagan on this, because we're really touching a nerve, and it's one we need to address. There is a difference between the constitutional republic and the partisan rules of the different political parties. The fact is that we don't want to see, as Republicans, I don't think people want to see our rules federalized, but Michael, is it safe to say that based on what we're seeing here, you would expect most of the states to go to a primary system that perhaps is not exclusively a beauty contest, where it's not tied to delegates in future campaigns?
You know what happens? It will be a beauty contest. It always is a beauty contest, and you'll find people mad that it's that kind of a contest at that point if it's a primary in that way. It's interesting. The people who are mad because their person maybe isn't winning the delegates. The people who are winning the delegates aren't mad. It goes back and forth. To sit there and listen to this, and your caller you had from Alaska. I mean, JD, the question I would ask her, as Steve Malzberg asked me at one time, okay, if Trump doesn't win and Cruz does win, will you support Trump? And 100% of the time, you're going to hear, no, I won't support Trump, or I won't support Cruz. And Rush Limbaugh is just making radio talk, because the reality of it is that it's not the establishment that are going to beat Trump or Cruz. It's going to be the Trump people not voting. It's going to be the Cruz people not voting, because they're not going to go out. They have found a reason not to vote, or they're trying to find a reason to find an excuse why maybe Hillary Clinton may be the next president of the United States. And it's because we don't show up. It's not because the establishment has made some grandeur choice out there.
Well, there have been bitter conventions and bitter fights before. Eisenhower and Taft in 52, 76, Reagan Ford when your dad came down and gave that great extemporaneous speech. The fact is, this sets up.
But what my father did was, he was there to unify the party. That's what he was doing. And there is nobody talking about unifying the party with this. You have Donald Trump talking about what? Hoping that, in fact, there's not going to be violence. And then saying, well, it's not me saying there's going to be violence, but in fact, there might be violence. I mean, the fact of the matter is, this is what Donald Trump is doing. And you may be able to get away with it in business, but when it comes to politics, it's a completely different issue with what's going on. And what you've got is a mad electorate, because that's the way Donald wants them, so they can...
No, and Michael, then you got Ted Cruz saying, nah, I didn't win the votes, but I got the delegates, nah. So don't blame just Donald Trump.
That's why John Kasich would be a better candidate, because he's not pissing people off.
Well, it's hard to say when you're, and I love John, he did a good job balancing the budget, but it's tough to make the case when you've only won Ohio, as critical a state as that is. Speaking of Ohio, speaking of, okay, good. Speaking of Ohio, to the Queen City of the West, Cincinnati, Larry is on the phone. Larry, welcome to Newsmax TV.
Hi. Just had a quick question. It thought it was a bit off keel, but I think one of your former callers and Michael kind of segued into this. And my question was, when will someone start the conversation about having a fully publicly funded presidential election? Not necessarily, state or any party, but open elections funded by a central fund.
As someone who has run for office, I can tell you why instinctually and instinctively I would reject that. That becomes welfare for politicians. And you put in the hands of the government the ability to determine who is a, quote, viable candidate. And worse, you take money from the people, from their tax dollars, and basically use it as welfare. Far better to do this, sir. Mr. Justice Brandeis said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. There should be instant reporting of who is giving what to whom, and you should have the right to give money not to your tax dollars to candidates you may not agree with, but if you're so inclined to give money out of your own personal treasury to those candidates. Larry, thanks for the call. Let me return to D.C. McAllister, who has seen more than her share of political intrigues in the District of Columbia, D.C. Your take on where we head from this. Has the Trump campaign brought back the notion of public funding, and because Mr. Trump says he's going to self-fund? We've got about a minute left, D.C.
So we only want to have wealthy people run for office, and then it'd be ridiculous. I mean, I think you made the right argument. I mean, this is something that we can all be participating in. This is a private enterprise, and that this is what we need to be doing. We don't need to have all these rules about giving money to the campaigns. It's ridiculous.
Simply stated, if people know who is giving what to whom, you know it, and it's out there, and people have the right to support the candidate of their choice. Final word to you, Steve Malzberg, 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, again, I just think blaming Donald Trump for, I'd say on every show almost, no matter who the nominee is when this is all over, and you were right, JD, we've had very contentious, bitter fights before. We have to coalesce and beat the enemy. And I said, yes, the enemy to our way of life in this country, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And I hope we all realize that.
Thanks to all of you for an impassioned discussion. Michael Reagan from Southern California, D.C. McAllister there in Washington, and our good friend Steve Malzberg, as well as John Gizzi, both from Newsmax New York tonight. When we come back, presidential historian Craig Shirley looks backward to look forward, and also to talk about the present situation as we continue.